there are commitments and promises that you can keep to yourself that don't necessarily require you to even make the commitment to saying, hey, I'm doing this because I have this expectation that I will lose anywhere from 5 to 10 pounds before the end of the year. In fact, it might be of benefit to throw away that aspect of it and think about it a little bit differently. And here's the approach that we take inside of the Fitness Fix.
Let's link up with Krysta on the Fix. She's a wellness coach with a focus on mental well-being and physical strength.
What's up, Fix listeners? Welcome to our latest episode of the Fix podcast. I'm your host, Krysta Huber. Another solo episode coming to you guys this week. Happy Thursday if you were listening on the day that the episode drops. I say it every month, but here we are approaching the second half of another month as we inch closer and closer to the end of the year. And now that I've gotten to close to almost 200 podcast episodes, I'm sure there are podcasters who are episodes like 500 plus who think this all the time, because I'm already starting to feel it at close to the 200 mark. There are a lot of topics that I know I've done before, but I want to revisit them for two reasons. One, because we get new listeners to the show, and because this is the type of show that you don't necessarily have to listen to in any sort of chronological order. Maybe you missed that episode. Maybe you weren't around when we did that topic. But second to that, I'm a different person than I was maybe at the time that I recorded that topic. And therefore, I've had different life experiences. I've had different things happen to me. I've changed my mind about things. And I want to revisit some of these topics. I will say what I'm about to discuss, I have not changed my mind about, but I think that I've come up with new ways to be able to explain things because of the things that I've gone through in my own life, and from seeing what really resonates with clients that I work with one-on-one, from seeing what resonates with clients that I've worked with in the group setting, and also just from your guys' feedback on these episodes, as well as the conversations that we're having on Instagram. A like or a comment on a post, a comment especially, is major currency when people see it as relatable or they comment and think that it's funny. I've definitely been getting into more of like a lot of my like joking, lip syncing kind of stuff recently, if you follow me on Instagram. And I can tell that when there are a bunch of comments on a particular post, it is because it's relatable. And when you say, oh, something's relatable, it means that people see themselves in that content. And when I was getting ready to sit down and kind of decide where I wanted to go with this episode for this week, I went back, I looked at my last few Instagram posts, and the one that stood out to me the most was touching on this concept of having an all or nothing mindset. And again, like I just said, I have definitely done at least 2 other episodes on this topic. However, I saw this fun little trend on social media and I wanted to jump in on it. And I liked it as it applies to this topic because it actually shows us how freaking ridiculous our all or nothing mindset is. So let me set the stage for you in case you didn't see this post. I had 3 different scenes, and I actually thought of a few others that I'll throw out there, but I had 3 different scenes that I recorded in this Instagram reel. And basically it was me doing things and purposely messing them up so much that I would just want to start all the way over. So here's what I did. First scene, I was pouring a cup of coffee and I started to spill the iced coffee onto the counter, which, by the way, so many people commented asking what it was like to clean that up. It was not fun to clean up. And part of the reason why I waited like 2 weeks, I had this saved in my like ideas little folder that I have. And I waited like 2 weeks to do this post because every time I would go to do it, I'd be like, I need to think of a way to do this that I don't want it to make a total mess, because I like keeping things neat and orderly. Total aside. But anyway, so the first one was me pouring the iced coffee and I missed the glass and it spills everywhere all over the counter. So then I just don't drink the coffee. Second scene, I am folding clothes, and one of the shirts that I start folding, I drop it on the floor instead of actually just picking it up and refolding that one and continuing the rest. I take all of the clothes that I have on my bed and chuck all of them on the floor. Last scene, I'm making my bed and trying to straighten out my comforter and fix the duvet cover. And when I have to keep going back and forth from one side to the other, I get frustrated and then I just like rip the covers off entirely because they're not even on either side. We're able to laugh about it when we think about it in that context. Because truthfully, it is so absurd to think that if you were pouring a cup of coffee and you started to miss the glass, you just let the whole thing, go on the counter. It's crazy for us to think that if we start folding our laundry, I mean, it's a feat to fold your laundry sometimes and do that all in the same day that you actually wash it, that you'd make a mistake and then you would just throw everything on the floor. Why would you create more work for yourself? We can all laugh about it in that context. And yet we have no problem doing that when it comes to focusing on our nutrition, focusing on our fitness, and trying to set realistic goals for ourselves and achieve fat loss that is truly long-term, that is truly your lifelong solution. This time of year is the perfect example of how we get so stuck in this mindset. So let's compare the spilling the coffee and folding the clothes situation to what that might look like if you were to say, hey, I am going to wait until January to focus on my goals, because you're doing this. There are some of you listening out there. There are people who follow me on social media I have this conversation with, where you're saying something to the effect of like, okay, it's already the second to last week of October. Halloween is right around the corner, which means we're only a couple weeks away from Thanksgiving, which therefore means we're only a few more weeks away from Hanukkah, Christmas, and New Year's. So at this rate, why am I going to bother getting started on this when I know I have upcoming travel, holiday parties, changes to my kids' schedules, deadlines to meet at work with the end of Q4? Let me just do what I said I was going to do last year and start come January 1st. Number one, you said you were going to do that last year. If you were sitting in a position right now on October 20 something that you don't like, and last year your game plan was to start on January 1st, let me just ask you the question. How's that working out for you? Seriously. It's obviously not working out for you. So what might it look like for you if you put yourself out there and committed to beginning to make the change today? And here's where this is the all or nothing mindset at work. You are telling yourself that the conditions are not going to work in your favor right now. So rather than even being slightly okay with making a couple of adjustments, you're like, nah, I'll just worry about it later. But here's the problem. You can't really worry about your health and fitness later because the body that you're in right now, it's going to continue to look the way that arguably maybe you don't love, maybe you know could be better, maybe you don't like how you feel, maybe you're lacking with your energy levels. It doesn't always have to be aesthetic based when it comes to your physique and your body. But there are commitments and promises that you can keep to yourself that don't necessarily require you to even make the commitment to saying, hey, I'm doing this because I have this expectation that I will lose anywhere from 5 to 10 pounds before the end of the year. In fact, it might be of benefit to throw away that aspect of it and think about it a little bit differently. And here's the approach that we take inside of the Fitness Fix. Whenever somebody joins our program, I intentionally do not put them in a calorie deficit on day one and not even on day 30. Do people lose weight in the first month of working with us? Yes, 100%. And that is an explanation for a different episode. If you want to understand that, if you want to understand all 4 phases of our program, you can listen to episodes 91 through 95, where I outline each of them. The phases that I'm describing right now are a find phase. And then the second to that is the fuel phase. Those are episodes 91 and 92. I will link them down in the show notes. Definitely check them out if you want to understand a little bit more about, getting from A to B, B to C, C to D. I'm going to talk about A to B. When someone comes in, the reason why I don't immediately put them in a calorie deficit is actually pretty simple once I describe it to you. And that is because if you were having success, you would not be in a position where you felt like you needed the solution that I am offering to you. So why set a person up in conditions where they're already not thriving, right? Because if they were able to thrive under the conditions of fewer calories, they would be doing it already. They would have the results that they want. So instead, I like to think about it from this perspective of why don't we actually increase your calories from the sense of let's have you start creating habits, structures, and routines based on more food than you would expect to consume when signing up for some sort of program that is promising weight loss. And let's put some numbers on that to make this very clear. Based on some experience you've had in the past, you've signed up for something and it probably looks like either a meal plan or a coach actually assigning you calorie targets that look like 13, maybe 1,400 calories. Most people can do that and they will be successful. You will lose weight because that's not a ton of food. Here's the problem. You've done that in the past, right? But to define that success, if it were really going to work, you wouldn't be, again, like I said, in the position that you are right now, where you're saying to yourself, I need to find a new plan. I need to find a new solution. Or you just saying, hey, like I'm not that comfortable, but I'm just going to go ahead and deal with it in January. Like I know I want to make a change, but I'm just not going to address it right now. Point is, you're in a position where you do want to make some type of change, whether you plan to take care of it in this moment, or you plan to kick the curb down the road, or you plan to just continue to tell yourself that story until finally like something really wakes you up. So sure, we could put anybody on 1,400 calories, but in doing that, we are setting you up to put you in potentially a pretty restrictive place with certain food choices, probably make you feel uncomfortable when it comes to navigating situations like going out to eat. And you guys know, if you've been listening to the show for a minute, I'm big on encouraging you to be able to live your best social life and travel and have fun and do all of those things. So let's actually get really real about what's the minimum amount of food we need to drop? Or better said, how can we get you eating the most food possible and still have you see the results you want? That's a reality. Jumping into a calorie deficit is a race to the bottom. Thinking about it from saying, hey, how high can I start and how little do I need to drop this down to still start to see the things that I want to see for myself? A lot of it is just saying like, hey, this is only a little bit from a calorie perspective, because what you're missing isn't necessarily in this reduction in food, you're missing a consistency to that behavior. So what we focus on in the Fitness Fix within the first month of working together, and really the first 3 months, I would say, is getting really, really good at the habits that are required for you to get to that phase where, yes, we are going to drop your calories down. Maybe it's 1,400, maybe it's 1,700, maybe it's 2,000. All of that depends on you as an individual, what your dieting history looks like, what you've tried in the past, how recently you've tried that in the past, how you sleep, how you train, how you recover, how you manage stress, what your digestion looks like. I need to get a good understanding of all those things. So that's also the reason why I'm not rushing you into a deficit, because I can't figure that out from you within the first 15 days of us working together. So we want to make all of those variables really solid, and we want them to be working in your favor, not against you. And if we add stress to your system by dropping our food as much as possible, yes, you might get that instant gratification of faster weight loss. But what's that worth to you if you actually start to feel worse? Not much, because if you start to feel worse, the downward side effect of that is that you're going to be like, I don't like how I feel. I don't want to do this. And then you're going to keep jumping back and forth on that dieting yo-yo that nobody actually wants to be on, but everyone feels stuck on. So instead, if we think about it from this place of like, let's learn how to increase, and I almost want to put increase in quotes, our calories, because I just mean be more intentional about eating more food than you would have in the past on previous diet attempts. When we do that, and when I say, hey, this gives us time to focus on the habits and the behaviors, well, what are those habits and behaviors? That looks like tracking your food. That looks like learning which foods represent which macronutrient, which foods represent carbs, which foods represent protein, which foods represent fat. From there, understanding how our foods fit together. Collecting information about yourself so that you see over the base of a week and a month how your digestion changes based on other things that are going on in your routine. seeing how you respond to your hunger cues when it comes to you doing certain types of exercise and us making adjustments from there. Collecting all of this information. I purposely call phase 1 of our program the find phase because that's really what we're doing. We're trying to find shit out about you. And it's important information that we're trying to find out about you, because the more I can understand you, the more I can help you come up with a game plan that meets you where you are, but pulls you up to where you need to be. And because it meets you where you are, that is what's going to rip you away from this all or nothing mindset. Because for me, the standard inside of the Fitness Fix, in telling you that I want to meet you where you are, I am saying I do not have the expectation that you are making a 180 tomorrow, the next day, or even 2 weeks from now, let alone 2 months from now. Instead, I want this to feel easy for you, because I want to show you that if we can identify the areas that make the biggest difference for you and then just rinse and repeat on those, be consistent with them, stick to them, that's actually what's going to get you the results that you want, especially through times of year that involve a lot of moving parts, like the holiday season, like times of a lot of stress at work, like times that include a lot of travel, or whatever it is, whatever kind of wrench that you're anticipating in your plans, that you've already told yourself this story that it's going to be too difficult for you to be able to achieve what you want. Well, how's it going to get any easier if you don't do it? The best way to get good at something is to actually do it. So the all or nothing mindset feeds into this avoidant behavior, because let's go back to the examples of pouring the coffee, cleaning your folding your clothes, and making your bed. If every time you went to fold your clothes, something dropped on the floor, would you honestly just never fold your clothes again? I wouldn't want to come over to your house if you were never going to fold your clothes again, right? You wouldn't do that. And we can laugh about that. And I can poke fun at that in these scenarios of like all these day-to-day things that we do. But then it's like we create these ridiculous rules for ourselves when it comes to our fitness and nutrition. Like you telling yourself, oh, because I know these events are coming up and because I know it's the holiday season, there's more food around that I'm going to be more tempted by. So of course I shouldn't be on this mission to lose weight. Why don't we get you on a mission to manage your weight over the course of the next 3 months? And hey, let's just see you losing like 5-6 pounds. Let's call that the cherry on top. You might even be able to lose 10 if you really lock in on it now and do something about it. There's nothing wrong with asking for support and wanting to maintain at a time during a season when statistically we know that the average person tends to gain at least 5 pounds during the holiday season. Why are you gaining 5 pounds in a 6-week period? Because you have these foods that you don't normally have around. Maybe you're moving less if you live in an area where it's getting colder out and you're not going outside as much, things get inconsistent with your workout routine, whatever it is. Why fall into being a part of that statistic? And what's crazy, like, again, thinking about this all or nothing mindset is like, we think that we either fall into that statistic or we don't. And us not falling into that statistic means that we're actively losing weight. There's something to be said for maintaining your physique. I said it in the last episode. That's the harder part. The exit strategy, maintaining the results that you work so hard to achieve, honestly, I think is harder than actually getting there. Because when you have that carrot that you're dangling for yourself in front of you, whether that's because you want to see a certain number on the scale, because you want to feel a certain way, because you want to have a certain reaction to yourself when you take photos, because you want to slip on a pair of jeans and have them go up with like no discomfort, or be able to feel like you're not unbuttoning them by the time you get to the end of a holiday dinner. All of those things are wins along the way that everyone is like very clear about wanting to get to, that then once you achieve them, it's almost like, okay, well, I got that. Great. Are you equipped to be able to hold on to it? And when you get there in a way that feels like a shortcut, or in a way that you're convinced was like very opposite from the way that you live your life right now, well, then of course you're not going to have the capacity to be able to hold on to those results. So I look at it as, let's set you up to guarantee that you will be able to have the capacity to hold on to those results, because how you get there is how you actually stay there. So if we can get really good at tracking our food, let's do it in a way that's fun. Let's do it during a season where you have more opportunities to eat meals out, where you have the opportunity to have maybe a few more drinks than you normally would at any other time of year. Why not do it now when you know that there are going to be scenarios that normally are your downfall? And it's not to say that you need to like completely overcome these scenarios, but how about you just ask yourself like, hey, maybe I want to handle this like 2% better. And I had a client just the other day. She was reflecting on her progress over the last 2 months, and she's been crushing it. I shared her progress pictures on Instagram recently, and she looks great. She's seen a ton of changes to the shape of her physique. The scales dropped more than 10 pounds. And she even started on this journey by herself before we were formally working together. And she's lost like over 30 pounds in the last year. Fantastic. But she said something really important to me. And this shows you a person who is working through overcoming that all or nothing mindset. She's really happy about her progress. She's fully aware that she doesn't want to lose it. But she said, hey, like I want to set a few more goals for myself before the end of the year. I want to keep this momentum going. However, she had a little asterisk next to her saying that. And she asked me, like, what is realistic for me? And I want to know what's realistic for me of what I could set as a goal for myself to accomplish before the end of the year. Love that she's thinking about setting a goal. Love that she's saying, like, hey, I want this to feel really realistic. So what might that look like for me? She said, like, how can I set this goal to make it feel realistic for me, knowing that we're going into the holidays? Like, is it 5 pounds? Is it 10? Is it to lose another X% body fat? Is it to fit into a certain pant size? I want to be able to be clear with myself on what I can accomplish, knowing that I don't exactly have like the same variables that I've had between September and October. That's realistic. And guess what? Because she's being realistic about it and because she's leaning into me for support, we're going to come up with a really good game plan for her that she's not settling. She's not backsliding and gaining any weight, but she's also not setting herself up to think she didn't do enough, right? She's living in her current reality and saying, hey, happy with my progress. Want to squeeze out a little bit more. However, I know that squeezing out a little bit more requires me to be really diligent with my plan. And you know why she's so honest about how diligent she needs to be? Because she's spent since May of us working together, looking at week after week, what habits she chooses to follow that help her get results and what she's maybe doing or not doing that prevent her from getting them. So she's seen very clearly on the weeks where she pre-plans her meals, she plans to hit her protein goals, she eats as many meals as possible as she can at home, she limits her alcohol intake, she can lose at least a pound. On the weeks where she says yes a lot more to drinks with friends, maybe she goes into the city a little bit for work, so she's having more meals out. Maybe she doesn't pack her lunch, where she doesn't get to the grocery store on the weekend because she's busy balancing her social life, where she doesn't pre-log her meals. She doesn't gain weight, but she doesn't lose anything. So she now has this very clearly, and we can see it on a chart. She's able to say to herself, coming to me with this goal and opening up this conversation, she's able to just ask the question of, knowing that the environment, the schedule that I'm going to be in is going to look more like the latter, where there's more drinks, there's more saying yes to going out to eat, there's more socializing, there's less consistency. What can I do to make sure I'm setting myself up with the right expectations to still make progress? And here's where I come in to say to her, hey, we've learned how to optimize some of this. You don't have to be perfect. You don't have to live in this world where you are saying, I'm not going to have any alcohol for the rest of the year, or where you're like, I'm only going to go out to eat one time a week. You can, if you want to, if you feel that like that's going to serve you. I will be the first person to raise my hand and say, I support that 100% if that's what you want to do. But I'm also the first person to raise my hand and say, does that actually make sense for this time of year? I'm really, really big on teaching clients that being in a calorie deficit is strategic from a timing perspective. When we have certain events like weddings and things like that, yeah, we got to work backwards from when that event is actually happening. But in a perfect world, most people I would recommend, without knowing very much about you and your personal life, to tell you to follow some kind of diet between if you want to get that like extra push in the year, September up until Thanksgiving, and then pull yourself out of that calorie deficit, bring your calories back up, focus on maintenance until at least January, if not longer. Because if you've made a lot of progress, you can wait until like March to start dieting down for 8 to 12 weeks before we get into the summer. Like, yes, if you want to make Memorial Day your deadline, cool. But like most people aren't actually like in a bathing suit or doing things until mid-June. So they'll give you another 4 weeks right there. So it's just like basing that off of the fact that like, yeah, in the winter, it can feel a little bit easier because people are going out less. They're not necessarily as social. Like lean into that. Set your dieting calendar, if we want to call it that, up at a time that makes the most sense for you, which would not be the holiday season, but that doesn't mean you throw in the towel completely. And that's where I'm going with what this client and I were discussing, because what she was saying to me was like, hey, I want to make sure I set myself up for success. And I still want to like have that carrot in front of me, because she knows that she's motivated by that motivation actually creates discipline for her, which I love, because that's really where the sweet spot is. But I also said to her, we can find a happy medium. You have evidence of the weeks where you're kind of like stagnant with your progress, which is still making progress because you're not gaining and you're learning how to maintain. So you kind of have an idea of like what you can quote unquote get away with in terms of socializing and being a little more lax, maybe not pre-planning your meals. But what if there's a sweet spot, just like a notch between these two things? Like on the one end, it's the extreme of saying no to things. And on the other end, it's the extreme of feeling like all you're doing is people pleasing and saying yes to everything and everyone and not actually thinking about what you want to do and what is going to make you feel good. The middle, that's where you can still make that progress, albeit a little bit slower. But again, who cares, especially this time of year? We're not gaining. So you're better off than a lot of other people. You're better off than the version of you last year and the year before that and the one before that one. So why the heck not? Why not lean into that, right? So that might look like committing to, at the very least, even on the days that you're not fully tracking your food, you're still tracking a protein goal and prioritizing hitting that. For this client, what we came up with was setting a drink limit for her to actually track her alcohol intake week to week so that we could get really clear on what those numbers looked like versus what she already does inside of our check-in process where she just tallies them up at the end of the week. Setting some boundaries there to say, hey, this is kind of like my max for this week and maybe even a max for the month, because we know from looking at her past data where she can kind of fall in to still be able to enjoy herself, but still be able to prioritize her goals. Let's call it living in that gray area, as I've said on episodes before this. Most people don't know how to define the gray area because you're not taking the time to put in the work to figure out what that is for you, because that is slightly different for everybody. That's why it's called a gray area, right? Like this one client may be able to have 5 drinks every week. And I certainly have another client who's like, you know what? I feel like the minute I have even 2 drinks, it takes a week for me to see those adjustments on the scale in the direction that I want them to go. So that client may then therefore decide that that's not really worth it to them. But overall, all of these nuances that I'm describing, coming back to this theme of being in this all or nothing mindset, we create these rules, we put ourselves inside of these boxes, and it's for that reason that we think everything is so much harder than it has to be. You don't have to lean into the story of, I can't lose weight during the holiday season if you don't want that to be your reality. You don't have to lean into the story of, I am going to wait until January 1st because that's when it actually makes the most sense. It doesn't. It doesn't make the most sense, because if you know that the holiday season has always been your license to say, F it, I'll worry about it come January 1, you don't like where that's gotten you. So let's do something about it by getting off the fence and taking action on it now so that we learn what works for you, what doesn't, what small limits we can put in place, let's call them like minor boundaries we can put in place. It doesn't have to be going from here to here. If we go from A to B, for those of you who are not looking at the YouTube video and listening to me on audio, I'm literally moving my hands like not even 2 inches apart. We can all agree that going from this inch right here to 2 inches past it is still making progress. And there are plenty other areas in your life, like when you're doing your chores, that you are completely okay with that. Maybe you're the person who does their laundry puts it in the dryer, but then you take like another day to actually fold it. You're not letting the all or nothing mindset get to you there. You're like, okay, I got like 80% of it done. And then if I need something, I'll grab it out of the dryer. And then maybe on Saturday, when I do have a little more time, I will actually take the time to fold it. Cool. That doesn't make you a bad person. You still do your clean clothes. You still got done what you needed to get done. The same sentiment can be applied to your approach to fitness and nutrition. Maybe you're not tracking your food 7 out of 7 days out of the week, but you can certainly do 5. Or maybe you purposely track on the days that you know you don't typically make as quality of decisions, like on the weekends, to bring more self-awareness to what your exact behavior actually is. Maybe you can commit to saying, hey, I normally have like 4 meals out per week. I'm going to cut it down to 2. And that could be the only like measurable change that you actually make. And I guarantee you'd see some changes to the scale into the direction you want it to go. You'd sleep better. You'd have more energy. You'd feel better in your clothes, all that good stuff. So get yourself out of the all or nothing mindset by recognizing that if you were to apply it to other areas of your life, we'd all laugh at it. And do yourself a favor and don't take that same approach when it comes to your fitness and nutrition. We can live in the gray area. There are a lot of good results in a very high quality of life that you are missing out on by putting yourself in these boxes and creating these rules and narratives for yourself that don't actually have to be true. If you want help doing it, you know where to find me. You can fill out the one-on-one coaching application right down in the show notes. Also, my Instagram bio, you can DM me at the Krysta Huber. If you missed our masterclass next week, we are going to be charging access for it. But if you listen to this episode and you want the inside scoop for free, I'm feeling nice and I will give it out to anybody who personally reaches out to me for it. So let's make the most out of these last 2 months out of the year, you guys. With that, from wherever you're listening from, I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day, and I will catch you guys next week.